When you're building a culture of belonging, every word counts. That's why Textio brings the world's most advanced language insights into your hiring and employer brand content. Our industry-leading approach to artificial intelligence and machine learning provides the tools needed to find more diverse candidates. In short, Textio builds more equitable workspaces, guiding businesses and writing more inclusive job posts. And we're building on that success by bringing even more products to the market for all people who share our belief that language matters. Words have power, and at Textio, we harness that power to increase the access and availability of value-driven work for everyone.
Good evening. Good evening. Happy Thursday. You know what time it is. It is time for the Access Point, brought to you by Living Corporate. Living Corporate is a digital media network consultancy focused on workplace diversity, equity, and inclusion. Living Corporate centers and amplifies Black and Brown voices in the workplace through digital media production and business-to-business consulting. The network offers a variety of programming, including the Access Point. The Access Point is a weekly webinar focused on preparing Black and Brown aspiring and experienced professionals for the workforce by having the real nuanced talks they don't know they need. During each episode, we examine real challenges you face at work and offer expert advice on dealing with your organization, your boss, your coworker, and your career. Here's the disclaimer. The thoughts and views expressed in tonight's discussion do not reflect the views of any organization with which the host or guest may be affiliated. I am Dr. Wendy M. Edmonds. I am an author of Intoxicating Followership. Why do people follow bad people? I am also a professor and a management consultant. I'm here today, glad to be here, and thank you for joining us. I want to introduce you all to my awesome co-host here, Dr. Lonnie Morris.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wendy. I am Lonnie Morris. I am a management consultant and professor. I spend most of my time helping people act right at work and working with professionals who want to unpack all the challenges that we have so you can hate your job less. I am so excited about this week and about this topic. We are today, the title of this show is I Think I Hate My Boss. So we get to this really saying that bosses get a bad rap, and sometimes they deserve it, and a lot of times they do. And we know people think their bosses suck, and we're going to unpack all of that today. We have two really extraordinary guests, and I want to introduce them both. The first is Dr. Kevin Sansberry, who is a behavior scientist and executive coach who focuses on evidence-based, inclusive, and equitable approaches to transforming leaders and eradicating toxic behaviors. He writes extensively on topics like CEO narcissism and abusive supervision. He is the creator and host of the Toxic Leadership Podcast, which I love, by the way, which reached as high as number four nonprofit podcast in the United States last year. He is the CEO and founder of Curva, the culture company through which he works with individuals and organizations to drive culture change through competency development. Dr. Sansberry, welcome to the show.
Hello. I'm just so happy to be here and link up with two of my favorite people, Dr. Wendy, Dr. Morris.
Welcome.
So, I appreciate the invitation, and I'm really excited about the topic at hand.
Great. We have a second guest who'll be joining us a little bit later, Dr. David Sippio. And Dr. Sippio is a business psychologist who empowers employees to engage their full potential by way of understanding their personal value and tapping into their emotional intelligence. He is the managing partner of the New Thought Leadership with more than 25 years of corporate experience in the transportation industry, including a stint at the Department of State and as an operations manager in both Kenya and Nigeria. We are in for some fun today.
Oh, yeah.
So let's start. We always start here so to get some foundation around what we're talking about. So the topic is about I think I hate my boss. But when we hear that, my question is, what is this really about? What are we talking about here? Dr. Sansberry, why don't you start us off?
Yes. So, wonderful topic. I mean, I think I hate my boss. I mean, we've seen plenty of folks who've dealt with this situation. I've worked with many people, whether it be in coaching, whether it being a consultant. And I want to just start off with etymology, if I can. Y'all mind if I break it down a little bit?
Please do.
Come
Okay.
on, come on.
Okay. Let's go back. So I think I hate my boss. What a lot of people may not realize is the word boss is actually an offensive term. It's boss, and it comes from Dutch. And in countries like South Africa that were, colonized and such by the Dutch historically, the word boss really became a term that was created by black people in South Africa to address a white manager or overseer. So if you look at like that word in general and look at the etymology behind it from a Dutch standpoint, it describes master, it describes supervisor, it describes, and we took it in American, it describes your boss, right? But the word in itself has negative connotations historically. And so when you think about how people use that terminology and all of that, one could say, yeah, okay, we changed the word, it means respect, okay, blah blah blah. But what are we seeing in the news? What are we seeing in application? There are too many bosses and not enough leaders. So that's where I'm gonna start.
Come on. He already starting off. Go ahead.
And so, I mean, at the end of the day, when we're looking at the workplace and then the hierarchy that we created in the society, I could be down with having, Dr. Wendy, you do toxic followership. I could be down with the concept of followership. That's not the problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Right.
so having power and having direction and having a mentor, all that kind of stuff. That's not a problem. But individuals wield power in such a negative way, it kind of perpetuates the originality of where the boss word came from in the first place.
And so, I love this because I read in there's a site, Pay Stubs Now, which focuses on like payment and processing, but a lot of career stuff. And just this week, they had an article on what if I hate my boss. And they said there are 6 reasons employees tend to dislike their supervisors and managers, and they list them as being a micromanager, unclear expectations, ineffective communication, that employees sometimes don't feel valued, they're asked to perform tasks outside of their job description, and because they're poorly compensated. So if we already know the boss is not the fuzzy, warm term that we're looking for, that Black people created it to really say this is somebody I don't like anyway. And we're taking this idea of a boss and we put that person in the workplace who's overseeing, as you said, Dr. Sansberry, and supervising others. And they've got all these traits right here. These are the two of you are the experts on toxic stuff. So tell me what's going on.
There's power dynamic.
Power.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. It's really It's because in a lot of cases, I've worked with and met plenty of people as a consultant where they don't necessarily hate the person as a person. They're like, oh, they cool, but I just don't hate him as a boss, And it's right, and it's more so like, and that's actually comforting because I'm like, okay, cool, because we hating a person that takes a lot of vitriol, that takes a lot of energy, right? But they not like that. They not like, no, I hate the institution, I hate the system that I'm in. And so when I think about micromanagement, where I think about pay discrepancies, where I think about working outside of scope, that really just is telling me a poor system. That system might have promoted somebody into a position that they weren't ready for, because it takes a whole hell of a lot of skills to lead another person or lead a group of people or lead a department. That's if I'm going root cause, that's the root cause. Because we can't just keep going after these symptoms with these Band-Aid fixes. The root cause is we need to put the right people in these jobs.
Mm. Well, that makes me think about something. So putting the right people in places, asking so that they are capable of asking the right people to get the job done, that's a whole different ball game, right? Because if you don't have, you can have people who are in leadership positions and may behave like a boss and for fun, so that they can see how other people may not be successful, even knowing that from the start. How about using the word, you hear this term all the time, voluntold? That's the perfect setup. So when I read that article, Dr. Lonnie, and I looked at those 6 items that they spoke about, and I thought about how those who wield that power that you talked about, Dr. Kevin, This is a way of setting up the subordinate. This is a way of setting up another individual. This is another way of being toxic in the workplace, is when you know that someone may not be capable, and instead of providing support and services to help them, professional development training, so that they can be better at what they do, if you see a weakness, they will voluntold, which means that you're putting them in a place to do something that you already know they're not capable of doing.
And a true leader will never have to voluntold somebody.
Absolutely.
Come on now.
A true leader will never have to voluntold somebody, because if you're a true leader, people are going to want to do it for you, because there's reciprocality there. It's reciprocal in nature, meaning I want to, I want the department to succeed. You inspire me to do better. You inspire me to go back to school. You care about my career just like I do. I mean, probably not at the same extent because it's my career, but I view you as a mentor, blah, blah, all that. And so you wouldn't ever have to really volunteer anybody, because they want to follow you. A lot of people don't look at the formula here. The formula is leadership plus followership is action.
There we go.
Ooh,
now we're talking.
They go together. Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Leading by example. How about if I see that that's what you're doing, I want to do that anyway.
Yep. I want to do it anyway. And so when they talk about, if you look at the research related to, transformative leadership, servant leadership, the output of all of those traits that you see there is, I'm inspired. You are inspiring me to be greater than myself. You're inspiring me to go the extra mile. Work doesn't necessarily feel like work all the time now, because you're inspiring me to do so. We got organizations full of bosses. Oh, okay. you kind of coercing me to do everything, because voluntold is a coercion.
That's interesting, right? Because
we tried to put that nice little word on there, voluntold. Voluntold is coercion.
And every time I hear it, I hear people laugh behind it. I hear people laugh behind. I hardly think it's funny.
Nah. There's nothing positive about being voluntold to do anything. The fact that you voluntolding somebody, if voluntold is in your playbook as a leader, guess what? You're not a leader.
Know that you're not a leader. Right.
You are not a leader. So let's take this a little bit further, right? So I saw this on GoodHire.com. And so they have a piece called Horrible Bosses. And this goes back to what you just said, Dr. Kevin. Are U.S. workers quitting their jobs or their managers? Now, we know we socialize this a lot in our industry, and we talk a lot about people are quitting the bad people, not the jobs. But here's what they found. When they surveyed 3,000 employees from what they describe as the 10 most popular sectors, and here's what they learned. 70% of this 3,000 said they at least somewhat enjoyed working for their manager. Okay, that's not too bad. 82% said, but I would quit if he or she was bad. 84% said, I can do my boss's job. 83% said, I can do my job without my boss's help. And almost 50% of them said that my boss, or less than 50% of them said, my boss is open and honest about compensation. So if we know the idea of boss is already tainted, and we know that people are moving into roles without necessarily being trained for them, that's why our industry exists, why our discipline exists. And now we know that people are horrible at times because it is a function of all of these other things. And most people are saying, and I would leave. Are we living in our last days? What's going on here?
That's ominous. That's an ominous thought. Yeah. I mean, I don't think so, because I think the way the modern, what's the word I'm looking for? The way the structures are kind of set up, a lot of organizations are trying to automate and trying to actually have less people so that they can gain more profit, first off. And so, and actually that would be spot on for all these bosses and all these managers if they just monitor robots. You know what I mean? And so I do think there are organizations. I mean, they'd be right at home now. But I do think there are organizations who are kind of going that automated route where, like, you kind of just need somebody to manage the process, manage the tools. If I needed somebody to be inspiring and things like that, one, leaders need to have less direct reports, because that being a leader takes time. Your one-on-one meetings are not just going to be about the product or about the output. It's going to be about you, because you are part of the output. Having my direct reports not only do great jobs, but also get promoted and also be able to take the company to new heights and stuff like that. That requires a little bit of motivation and inspiration from the leader above them, because I need a runway to do that. I can be a hotshot, self-starter, initiative, you want to name it all. I could be that person, but if I'm not in the right system, that system will never see me thrive. And so one of the leader's primary roles is create that runway for your employees to fly.
I love that.
Yeah, that's nice. That's a great philosophy. We just don't always see it, which is what keeps us in business. But I will also say that whenever there's training and development, there's always a look to the staff, right?
Yeah.
And how many times do you see leadership programs for leaders?
Yeah. Not a whole lot.
There you go.
And
there
it's
you
not
go.
the
Silent, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, and what is that? What signal does that send? That sends a signal that there's something wrong with staff. That sends a signal, right? Because if truthfully,
you the ones need to improve, right?
Y'all need to improve. A leadership program, there's no end to that. A leadership program 10 years ago would be different than it is today. A leadership program today is different than it will be 10 years in the future. And so you're never done. You have to be able to learn how to be flexible throughout lifespan. You have to throughout decade. And so leadership development should be an ongoing thing for every leader of people.
I love that. I see that Dr. David Sippio jumped into our space. I don't know if he has audio yet. Dr. Sippio, can you hear us? We'll continue the conversation. We're waiting for you to join us. So I
can't wait for you, Dr. Scipio. Come on.
So I want to say we've got a lot going on here. I love this idea of creating the runway for people to fly and do that. But I want us to take a look at this. Is it possible that this idea of hate my boss, this whole syndrome, is industry specific? I'll tell you why I asked that. So there's a study in industry relations, maybe at the beginning of the pandemic, that is called How Common Are Bad Bosses, right? So we're following this idea a lot. And here's what they found. There are particular industries where people identify managers as the ones they hate and supervisors they can't stand a lot. Number one, which is why I want Dr. David Sippio to get on here, because this is his area of expertise. The first one, number one on the list, is transportation. Number two, manufacturing. Number three, which surprised me, is human services and social work. We move down to some other ones that are pretty exciting. Number six is hospitality. Wait, you're gonna love this. You're gonna love this last one. Number 7, so in the top 10, retail. So they said there are particular places where people hate their bosses. Why is that?
I'm surprised the post office didn't show up. I mean, really, because remember the saying, going postal? It was because people hated their bosses.
Going postal on my boss.
Yeah, I remember that. So I'm just surprised at the order, and retail's at the bottom.
Well, it's not at the bottom. It's number 7. It's number 7 out of the top 20. It ain't the bottom. Not the bottom.
Okay. It's like at the bottom?
So is there something specific to industries? Because I have some clients I work with often, and we talk about what's happening at work. And we're saying, hey, we see this repeated over time, no matter if they move from one organization to the next. If they're staying in the same industry, those same issues arise. And so they're often dealing with this, even when they make changes, even when they move up, even when they get more money. Some of the behaviors are consistent. So what's happening that's industry specific?
Think about an industry as one giant ship. People that work in that industry move to different rooms on that ship all the time. And so the ship's going to have the same vibe. It's going to have the same culture. And so if I had lack of training at this manufacturer, and that's the culture, and that's what I've learned, you'll see that follow through with other industries and in other manufacturing industry, because people move around. And while people move around, so do their mindsets and the flaws that they had at the previous company. And so that's not surprising to me. I also think when we think about the industries that you named, social work, manufacturing, a few others, a lot of them did seem like a higher stress environment related to customer service. And so there could be a compounding, right? So there could be a compounding effect of my job is already stressful, and a toxic leader or a bad boss heightens that stress that I already experienced at work. And there's actually research that supports that.
Wow.
And remember that some of those environments too, there's a duality as it relates to customer service.
Exactly.
So there's the internal customer, your colleagues, your coworkers, your boss.
Yep.
And there's the public. There's
the
consumer.
And I have to get beat up. I have to get beat up mentally and psychologically. There's something in the research that talks about deep acting and surface level. It is I forget the name of it, but it's emotional labor. Emotional labor is that construct in which I'm at work and I might be getting yelled at or whatever, but the customer's always right, so I got to put on that smile. You see it in service level jobs where I'm providing a service, and so I'm engaging in emotional labor already. And so imagine having a toxic boss at the same time as you already engage in emotional labor. That's so much to carry. And so I'd wonder if these things that we talk about are heightened. You say, exactly.
I feel anxious right now. I want to bring Dr. Sippio into it.
Dr. Sippio's
in. Dr.
Hey.
Sippio. So we're talking about these industries and why we see so much of the I hate my boss syndrome there. And to catch you up, we identified there's a study that says it is the worst in transportation.
I heard transportation and I started laughing because I'm like, yes, it's rampant. But nobody talks about it. And it's kind of hard to navigate through the system when everybody's feeling, supervisors or managers or boss or whatever, they feel like, they got their place in the system and they, solid and foundational set. So it's very challenging to get through this transportation field. That's why I love the industry, because it poses so many opportunities. Let me share for a minute, if I can, some of my experience in this thing. Trying to get moved up in the upper management, middle management has been a very big challenge because it's a very closed network and very closed-minded people. And the challenge is to keep yourself composed, that you don't become the bully. I'll say it that way. And one of the things that really helped me out was understanding emotional intelligence. And now I've been doing some study with positive intelligence, which is labeled as mental fitness. I don't know if you all have heard of that term.
I have. Tell us more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, before I got into positive intelligence, I started understanding that I needed to make some changes. I was teasing with Dr. Morris yesterday when we was talking about the subject, and I said I've been born again. So I don't want to talk about the bad leaders.
A bad boss would make that happen to you, right?
I
had to kill that person. I had to come out a new man. Can't take no more of that.
And in doing so, I realized that I had to take the focus off of them and take ownership of my own destiny. And
that's a word right there. That is a word
like
right
Dr.
there.
Dr. Max, come on.
That's a word.
Yeah, and I'm not one for following people that just because of their title anymore. I think we've been brainwashed and conditioned to do that to an extent that we forget who we are. All because somebody has a title and they're not treating you like anything. And I just started studying some metaphysical stuff. I started studying more deeply positive intelligence and emotional intelligence. And more specifically, I started understanding my role, because I come from an abusive household where my father was the sergeant at arms. And I realized how deeply rooted, that situation left me crippled. So I had to work through a lot of layers of frustration and disappointments and not understanding the system and not wanting to be a part of the system because, it was just not my style. It didn't fit me. And I was trying to force it because I was searching for the material gains. And it just took me down a bad path. So I had to recover. And jokingly, I said I was born again, but that's basically what had happened. So I'm entering back into corporate as a coach and talking about some deep level stuff. I'll share some things with you right quick, and I'm going to shut up. The things that really breaks us down, and I call them saboteurs. And they hide themselves within your body and your spirit, your mind, your conversations. And their titles are the judge, the avoider, the controller, the hyperachiever, hyper-rational, hyper-vigilant, a pleaser, restless, stickler, and victims. And I realized that once I started seeing these terms and understanding how they show up, because they show up in your conversation, they show up in your lack of confidence, they show up in your inability to move and progress. So you start pointing the finger at everybody else other than yourself. And, I realized that I had to take control of my mind. And when I did my dissertation, I had one of those bosses that was just challenging me. And I realized Dr. Morris told me one time that I sent her a memo and I was expecting her to respond back to me. And he told me she did respond by not responding.
Come on now with that word.
Oh,
come on with that word.
That was so
they may not respond
profound.
how you want them to, but you got to respond.
The silent treatment.
Somebody else been dealing with that this week. I want to stick with this for a second, Dr. Sippio, and I want to move us to this one thing that's related to what you're saying about how people cope with the bad bosses. And Dr. Kevin, you mentioned this a little bit earlier as well. So earlier this year, beginning of the year, the European Journal of Work and Organizational Psychology had a study called Fake It Till You Make It with Your Boss.
That don't work. Keep going.
Right?
Keep going.
We're talking about all these things about how people cope with this. And so we all are doing it. We're looking at the things that Dr. Sippio was saying right now about, I'm too this, I'm stressed, all these things, I'm the victim. And what they found in this study is that faking positive emotions was positively associated with employee withdrawal. So if I'm pretending to be happy, I am already quiet quitting. Come on with it, Dr. Wendy, right? I'm already quiet quitting. And the craziest thing, and we talked about this before the show with our executive producer, that it was different for men than women. For men, suppressing negative emotions was positively associated with the leader's satisfaction in your communication style, because they don't like how we talk to them. So if we pretend like we're happy, then we get a good rating in communication. But it wasn't the same for women, because y'all always angry, right, Dr. Wendy? So no matter what you say, they're gonna hate it. So how do we get through this idea of coping? And Dr. Sippio was beginning to give us some strategies on that. So Dr. Sansberry, take us through this. What's happening with this?
Well, I mean, so fake it till you make it up. It's that's like a really common trope in America. And in particular, you tend to see that a lot. Like I didn't first hear that till I started working in more white spaces, to be frank. I didn't grow up in a family where fake it till you make it. Like that wasn't like a thing. It's like, we were just more we just I'm gonna just say it. Yeah, it was just real. And like one of the things, there's a psychologist back in the day, Dr. Alfred Adler. He had this thing called acting as if. And it was this therapeutic technique that he used to teach. And I'm wondering if some of that came from that. And I get like, I'm a manifest things. Like I understand that. I'm a see it to believe it. I understand all of that. But we're talking about the suppression of emotion, this suppression of feeling. That's a
Yeah.
way different thing than I'm
Yeah.
a visualize. That's way different. What tends to happen is when we are in that state of faking it till you making it, when I'm suppressing how I feel and trying everything to like, oh, maybe they'll change, maybe they'll, that's, you're gonna gain a whole bunch of resentment. And one of the things that Nelson Mandela said was like, resentment is like drinking a poison and hoping it's gonna kill your enemies.
Oh wow.
Oh,
And right, and so now you walking
Wow.
around poisoned because you've been faking it to make it, hoping that toxic leader or that toxic person, and let me be clear, the person who is exhibiting toxic behaviors, because I'm not trying to label
There
people,
we go. Yeah.
because I believe everybody has the opportunity to rehabilitate and to, all of that. And so like the person that is exhibiting toxic behavior, we are hoping that by us faking it and us like, oh, it's going to get better, we're going to wait it out, we are hoping that they see that. But except we don't realize we are in a victim cycle. We're in a cycle of victimization and a cycle of abuse. And it gets really real on people. And so I've worked with clients for years where they fake it to make it. And I used to run FMLA for about a population of about 4,000 employees. And I've literally seen psychosomatic issue where people have that breaking point, and you better believe the body keeps count, and the body keeps score. And so like people's hair's falling out, people having immune system diseases and things like that. And so it's just stress. And we don't do enough in our medical system to validate mental well-being proactively. We all reactive right now at this stage. And we also don't do enough about workplace stress in itself. We tend to try to say, oh, you're not tough enough, you're not strong enough, you just got to do more faking. And we're seeing what's happening with our opioids and all of that kind of stuff. We're seeing the outcomes of this fake it to make it kind of prevalence. And so I just think I'm glad the study you said showed negative impact on that, because it definitely is.
And poison kills, poison destroys, poison from within, and that's why you saw the signs of that. It was exposed, right?
And one thing that companies need to care about is poison spreads. And so it is that much more important.
Say that
to
again.
ensure poison spreads. And so when it's contagious,
it's like COVID.
It is definitely like COVID. I mean, like we got a mental health COVID, and like we got to do something about it, because that research also shows that yes, one bad apple can spoil the bunch. And so we have to do something about the root cause. And so when I have folks in my system that are disgruntled and things like that, I'm not going to say, oh, they just a single minority voice, which I've heard companies try to do. I'm going to say, no, let me listen to that one person, because they might be a symptom of other people who just haven't spoken up yet. And so we need to take that serious.
That takes courage to do that. That takes courage.
Absolutely.
And, right?
Yeah.
That takes courage.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is I keep talking about root cause, because that's how you get to that real. That's how you get to that, that underlying, why. That it takes courage, because some of that you might find out is you. And that's hard to wrestle with sometimes. Like why every place I work is toxic? Why everybody, everywhere I go,
what's wrong with them?
Or my coworkers, my nerves everywhere I go. Well, let's look in the mirror, because it could be you too. So look in the mirror.
Oh my God! Oh, I love that.
Well, more than likely it is the individual.
Common denominator, right?
Yeah.
Wow. We talk about courage and confidence, and what can we do about it? The situation calls for us to understand ourselves. We naturally think negative as a lifestyle. And I just had a situation today. I was talking to this young man about supervisor. He's applied 10 times or so, he said. And he's gotten to the point where he's just, very negative about them bringing him on board as a supervisor. And I was telling him, you have to really be careful about the things that you're saying to yourself. You have to also look at yourself, because we can't keep blaming everybody else. At some point, as you said, Dr. Sansberry, that we have to look at ourselves. And when I took that reality check and I swallowed that pill, it wasn't easy, because that's what I was doing. That's what the the system, I call it, teaches you to do, to blame
it is a system.
else.
Oh yeah, there's a system. Absolutely, there is.
So, we could talk about the problems, we could talk about the toxic leader, but until we get that poison out of our system and we understand how to do that, the system will never change. But when we clear ourselves, we clean ourselves of that poison in us, then we have an opportunity to affect the system. But we have to be very courageous because people's lifestyles are depending on these jobs that they're working at, and that's the corporate. That's the thing that's really holding us back because, I got to make a living. I've been here for so long. Whatever the language is, we have to deal with that, strengthening the individual.
Totally agree. And I think one thing that needs to be said is like, sometimes, because there are toxic bosses and toxic leadership, toxic organizational cultures. Totally. That's why we all on this call. That's why we all have jobs and we all busy. But here's one thing to think about. If the person, the employee, whoever it might be, hasn't done the work internally, they gonna be forever, they poison, right? So they're walking around with toxic lenses. And so what that means is they might encounter a new system, a new boss, or anything like that, but they haven't done anything about the harm and the hurt. So they're gonna view things that are not toxic and not harmful as harmful because they haven't solved or healed the past harm. Yep. You got to remove the scar tissue. And so that's just something to be mindful about. And that's why, it's in my belief that mental health and all that, we need to have that as a mandate for every employee and not just EAP.
And we know that's not enough because they have already figured out that it's only going to take 3 weeks to figure this out in you, and you're going to be all better.
You get your three free meetings, your three free sessions.
3 sessions and you good. No, that's not how it works. I need ongoing. It needs to be an ongoing thing. As long as somebody is cognizant in they mind's eye, you're gonna need therapy. You're gonna need to bounce things off of somebody because that should be literally part of my compensation package. Like that needs to be a thing. And if we care about performance and resiliency, I wonder why. I ain't gonna wonder why. I know why they don't do it, but it needs to be a thing.
Dr. Sansberry, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
In us going to work, we always hear about following the mission and getting people to rally behind the mission and the vision. But are we really getting people to be productive is a question of mine. And it could be, this question could be rhetorical, but just something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Are we really asking people to produce? Because, my understanding is people are so used to fulfilling the system's goal. They keep hiring the same people that's dysfunctional.
Yeah. We not
all the time.
But it goes back to your word of productive. I think the game is being played for us and on us. Productive. Productivity is not you as an employee thriving. Productivity is you increasing my shareholder value. That is productivity. Because that is if you look at a CEO's compensation package at most companies, I'll guarantee you most CEOs do not get paid by how good the organizational culture is.
Well, we've seen that.
You've seen that. They don't get paid
by. That's right.
And so I'm not even like wondering, why these organizational cultures work? Because they don't, they look at the root. Look at how people get paid. We get paid off of you bring your stockholder price, your shareholder price on a quarterly basis. We get paid off of if you can create less what do you call that? Basically, we less waste and things like that, more efficient from a financial standpoint. And I understand why corporations exist and things like that. But again, if I would be a big believer in massive change and true change if we started incentivizing all the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, I had a professor one time that made a comment, and he said, whenever bad behavior shows up in the workplace, you can always trace it back to incentives. And I thought, wow.
Always.
He said always. And it is true, what you just said, too, about how businesses are rewarded. And so I have heard, and I know I'm not the only one here, that you've heard someone in management say, "Oh, I know they're no good. I know they have toxic behaviors,
But
but they help us with the bottom line. They make sure that
there
we
you
get the
go.
bottom line."
There
And
you
so
go.
until you change that thinking, it isn't going to happen.
They
That's
not
the
there.
motivator.
That's
Right,
right.
that's the
Right.
motivator.
Yeah, and like literally nobody on this call that's listening or on the call as a speaker, none of us work for free, right? And so the incentives are everything. The incentives in a job are hand in hand. And so when there's a mismatch between the incentives and the expected outcomes, we're gonna see what we're seeing. We have to align what we expect of people with incentives.
And
It ain't about being a good person. It ain't about, oh, I want to be less like, no. I don't want to play the altruism game.
Yeah,
I want to
yeah.
play. We're gonna align these incentives up and make that more efficient.
So let's look at altruism just a little bit, slightly, right? So there's a difference between this really toxic person we've been talking about, so the person that falls under "I hate my boss," and the person is just not a good boss, not a good supervisor. So we saw this in, the end of last year, the International Journal of Organizational Analysis. They got a study called "Why Some Leaders Qualify for Hate." Yeah, some of y'all deserve it, and we found the reasons. And so what they said is there's a difference between the autocratic narcissist who creates dysfunction with their behavior, and the person who is more laissez-faire. That people hate the autocratic narcissist, but people who just don't really get involved, they don't hate them. They just know they're not effective. What should we be doing on the inside to deal with this and to make sure people are separating the two so we don't lump together all the people who qualify as bad supervisors as the people we hate?
Behavioral specificity. And what that means, just in just regular talk, we have to start naming what is toxic, because my toxic may not be your toxic, right? But if the organization,
Come on.
if the organization determines, here's our company culture. I mean, we talk about values and culture all the time, but they doing all this positive stuff like, oh, inspiration, trust, customer service. But okay, that's cool too. What do we not allow here? I want to talk about that. What is not allowed here?
Put that sign up.
Let me see that. Put that on the website. Put that on the website. I mean, you know what I mean?
Take down this sign about diversity.
I want to see the glitter around that sign. Let me see that. And so, because if we do that, if you specify the behavior, everybody will know what's up. Everybody will know what this culture is. And guess who that's going to help dramatically? Women and minorities. So, yeah.
Dr. Sippio, what you think about that?
I'm in agreement that this is a tough pill to swallow. I'm sitting here trying to think about how can we address this toxic bully. And the only thing that I've really come up with for myself is each individual have to spend time with that self and discover. We have to be more curious. One of the greatest things that I've learned from going through what I had to go through was that I have this little acronym: Beyond Excuses, Aware, and Transform. That's what keeps me grounded. Because it's systematic. This thing is so connected, so in place, and trying to address it from a system, I don't know if we have the answer or if it'll ever be corrected. So I have to go to each individual. We have to find groups of people,
Building allies.
People. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Dr. Wendy, you have something else?
Oh no, I was just listening to Dr. Sippio. Absolutely, building the allies, because it's all about association. So sometimes people find comfort in associating themselves with the toxic leader, right? Which is them, they begin to behave like them to let them know that they're on their side. But the breakdown comes with the change of leadership, the change in management, And it can just be one person that brings in a new vision that can change an organization. It takes us a long time, but in order to confront the bully, it takes what you would call that building that the allies around the organization,
Well,
and I would also say to not have them to be rewarded for that behavior. Too often we see where we saw it in the country, where at the political level, where bad behavior is rewarded.
Exactly.
yep.
And that's where the people are looking to. You know, in my research, billions of dollars are being spent to support leaders that are bullies, are toxic, as though nothing happened. So this is now an institution of bad behavior. And talk about rewarding. That's what they do when they spend this money, that kind of money, to keep the system in place. I said in my dissertation that there's nobody coming to rescue you.
Oop, there you go. That's a word too.
Right. Well, and I think it's not even an either or, because I mean you're gonna need that critical mass of people in the system to make shifts, but you also still will need the system to shift for sustainability, because people quit jobs, people get. I mean, we got the Great Resignation, so your critical mass is gonna be shrinking. The people that
Shrinking.
I mean, right? Your allies are gonna be going to greener pastures. They're gonna be going to different companies, and so not only do you need to have the grassroots effort, but you also while y'all some grassroots, y'all need to figure out what needs to change in the system so that we're not rewarding this bad behavior. Because as we see in this country, we are rewarding bad behavior, and the news and the pundits can say, "Oh my God, that's offensive, that's bad." They still in office, they still in power. So we can talk all day
Mm-hmm.
about racism and how bad somebody is, but if nothing happens to them, so what? It's just words. And
Mm-hmm.
so you have to be able to be systemically focused, as well as individual, as well as behavior. It has to be. It's all of the above, and that does. Excuse me. That does sound like a massive undertaking.
Like that's like I'm tired just listening to you.
But I'm just telling you, if we want to see true change, that's what change is.
Absolutely.
You can't, like, if I'm here's what it is. When I talk about behavioral change in systems, incremental change reminds me of, like, I'm trying to push a cart uphill. If you've ever pushed a cart uphill, what it's gonna do when gravity take over?
Roll back.
It's gonna roll back down. So you got that progress. You felt good, and you take the gas off. It's gonna roll back down. System is going to a new hill. We're gonna go to a new hill and start shifting policies. Start writing down what behaviors we go for in our culture and what we don't. Hold people accountable. Then we push the cart through the positive momentum of systems change. And it takes courage, but it's also going to take somebody with positional power. Let's be real. That, your critical mass can't just be, your level one employees who don't have the political power or the social capital in the system. You're going to need, more people on the org chart to support you. But if you're downhill, that cart will keep rolling. And that's how you create sustainability. Otherwise, we just gonna see band-aid fixes. And it's kind of like if somebody's in a abusive relationship and they have this thing in the abusive cycle called the honeymoon effect. You're gonna be in the honeymoon. And it's gonna revert back.
So I appreciate all those comments, and so I want to round us out with this last question here. So there are some people who are going to listen to this. They may be on with us on Twitter right now. They may listen to this later when we put it out on all the pods, and they may think, "Well, I don't really know who they're talking about, or I'm not really sure who this person might be." And I saw this in Business Insider, and I actually thought it was pretty funny. There are 16 subtle signs that you are the boss that everybody hates. I'm not going to read all 16, so I thought some of them were pretty corny. But the things that stood out for me are you're already going to have a gut feeling, right? There's some intuition about this that there's something up. 2, you're probably getting a little less eye contact than you would desire. People are likely avoiding you. Some people tend to call out sick And it might be because of what you mentioned, Dr. Sansberry, some mental health reasons. Well, I don't feel good about being at work today. I feel stressed. And people are maybe not smiling. And in the days of hybrid and virtual work, they might keep their cameras off. You may only get communication from them in email. And they probably are less passionate about their work. So if you happen to stumble upon this podcast and listen to this broadcast and understand these things we're talking about, and for some reason you're not sure, and it might be you, what are the things you should be doing right now? Let's start with you, Dr. Sansberry.
Okay, yeah. Well, first off, I would say that's from where's that from? Business Insider?
Yeah.
Some of those traits I would dig into more because some people don't smile. Some people have autism, and they don't do eye contact. So we gotta be a little more inclusive on that, because a lot of that stuff's not universal. And so read that article in depth, folks, and really look at what works for you, what doesn't, because not everything on that list might not be applicable. But I think ultimately the things to look at, if it might be you, is that the question I'm answering? What if it's you?
Yes.
What if it's you? I mean, I think, Dr. Sippio is an executive coach. I'm an executive coach. If someone has a stigma towards, going to therapy, because I think, again, I'm a big proponent of talking about mental health and therapy. So if someone still has that stigma, like, I don't need that, I don't have time, I think getting an executive coach as a part of your being a leader, as a part of like your professional development is a beautiful thing to do. I think having that accountability partner there, setting up informal ways to get feedback from your staff. And that could be like, look, I know my performance appraisal system in this company, it's a pretty standard one. I'm going to do my own 360. I'm going to just send out 3 questions for folks to answer about me anonymously. And I'm going to have somebody else get, I'm going to set a system where I can get some anonymous feedback from people about how I impact them. Right. Yep. And you don't have to wait on HR. I've done that before outside of the HR system. I mean, I even worked in HR, but like,
me too.
I've had to do that before. And so finding ways to Dr. Scipio's point of remaining curious is really important there, because again, there are a lot of behaviors that might have been your superpower that are coming across toxic for people, and you don't even know it.
Now. That's
you don't even know it.
That's
right?
a big one.
And
come on,
people,
Spider-Man.
Right.
Get your web out of here.
People have been working for years in their superpower, but they superpower, it's all about perception, and it leads to like I've had one where you were great, you as the boss got promoted because you know how to do the work, and you get promoted and all you want to do is the work. You don't want to be a leader still, and so now you taking over all your employees' jobs, you answering their emails when you were CC'd, you shouldn't have answered, let them answer. You are not even allowing them to fly and allowing them to flourish based on work and productivity, and being busy is your superpower. And so having a 360 mechanism or an executive coach will not only be illuminating for that leader, but it will also provide that leader with space to do something about it.
I love that. Dr. Sippio, what are your thoughts? If the boss that people hate is you, what should you be doing?
Wow.
Yeah, that's a big one, right?
Yeah. I think I heard Dr. Sansberry say counseling. And I wholeheartedly agree, as much as that is a challenge. The other thing that I think, and just on a small level, is to increase our focus with meditation.
All right.
I think Dr. Edmond alluded to that quiet space. So I'm a big component of meditation, just learning how to quiet your mind, because that's where all the activity is at. And once you start seeing some of the benefits of meditating, and you can quiet your mind, you can navigate a lot better. And I'll close with that.
I think Dr. Sansberry summed it all up. One thing that I would add to that is for self-care, to take care of yourself.
Yes.
As a leader, it is tough. You are catching it all the time and dishing it out, and you have to take a break. And it needs to be done more frequently than you probably realize. If you're not getting the eye contact, that would be a clue that you really need to take that moment and take some time for yourself. And it may mean more than a day. It may mean more than an hour. And you know how some of the jobs will have a room where you can go into, a relaxation room. If you find that that's not enough, take a weekend.
I love that. I love that. So when we take a look at the spectrum of everything we discussed today about I think I hate my boss, here's what we learned this week. If you are an employee, you should make sure you spend time understanding your environment. There may be some things that are just natural to the organization you're in or even the industry that creates this type of atmosphere and these behaviors. We want you to talk about it. Speak up. Talk to your coworkers. Talk to your friends. Talk to your family. But we can't continue to stay silent about this treatment. Build your skills in emotional intelligence and positive intelligence. You've got to do the inner work to help with the outer projections. Take the focus off of the people that you hate, the boss that you hate. Focus on you and how to develop around that and continue to strive. Understand the connection you may have to dealing and coping with abuse. Dr. Sippio said, hey, sometimes it comes from things you dealt with in your life already, so it feels natural for you to accept that and continue to deal with it. Understand labels. How you show up is about how you talk about yourself, and what you speak about is what you become. So be careful with ideas around being the judge and the controller and the pleaser and identifying yourself as a victim. Be careful with faking it. If you are pretending that things are okay, the impact is more negative on you than it is on the other people. Focus on healing so you can go into new situations fresh. And identify what is toxic to you because it may not be the same for everybody. If you are the leader or a supervisor, understand the root cause of the word boss. We started out with that saying, hey, there's already something bad with that. Train people for supervisory roles so we don't just put people in there who don't have the skills to lead and manage people. Lead by examples so that people are inspired to be greater by what they see in you. Create a runway for employees to fly. Give them room to spread their wings, to grow and to flourish. Recognize symptoms and solve the problems. Identify the political power and the social capital within the organization that helps us sustain the types of changes that we're talking about. Consider an executive coach, get an accountability partner, get informal feedback from your staff. And Dr. Sansberry's done that. I've done that multiple times. Stay curious. Continue to ask questions and figure out new ways to do this, new ways to approach it. Remember that your superpower may also be your toxic trait, so it doesn't work for everyone. Self-care is very important, and take breaks more frequently and maybe longer than you would have imagined from the beginning. Find your quiet space. If you're in a group or a team, or this is about your department or your work group, recognize that bad behavior is contagious. People move from one space to another, and they carry those attitudes with them. Deal with the closed-mindedness in your coworkers and help them work through it, support each other in the process. Build allies, collaborate, connect people with sponsors in the organization and within the industry, and help people find allies. From an organizational perspective, put the right people in the right job. We end up with people we hate as bosses because they're not in the right job. Train people to be supervisors. Create leadership programs for leaders, not just for staff. Help people rehabilitate. They may have been toxic at one time and somebody that people hated, but they can be better. Proactively validate mental well-being at work. That is important. Make everybody should get an EAP. It should not just be for those first 3 free sessions. Add mental health to compensation packages. Change the incentives so that people are incentivized for well-being and people's happiness, not just for profits. Productivity is not the same as employees thriving. Keep that in mind. Specify the behaviors. We do a really good job of posting up what we want to see. We need to also call out the things we don't want to see. And to change the system, we must hold people accountable. So we take all of that in consideration from our talk today. I want to ask my guest and my co-host the last question here. If you don't listen to the things we just put out today, what is the tax you pay? What is the black tax? What is the cost of not doing these things? Quickly, Dr. Sippio, what's the price we pay?
The price you pay is your own life.
Life.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think even before that, the price you pay is your identity.
Identity. Dr.
And
Wendy.
the price you pay is your peace and your joy.
Peace and your joy. And I think the price you pay is you miss out on this reflection and quiet time that they've been talking about. I'm going to take as soon as this call is over. I want to thank everybody for joining us again on the Access Point. Is my favorite day of the week, Thursday. We love having you around. We love having these conversations. I want to definitely thank our incredible guests today, Dr. David Sippio and Dr. Kevin Sansberry. You are experts. We thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom and your expertise with us tonight. As always, Dr. Wendy, it is a pleasure to sit with you and talk through these issues. Thank you. If you are listening right now with us on Twitter, if you're listening to this in replay, thank you so much for having a great evening with us. We hope to see you next time. If you want to connect with Living Corporate, here are all of our socials. On the web, we are livingcorporate.tv. On Twitter, we are at Living Corporate. For LinkedIn, we are Living-Corporate. On Instagram, we are at Living Corporate. And you can get this podcast, The Access Point, wherever you listen to your pods. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Living Corporate is brought to you by Doximity. Over 90% of graduating medical students join Doximity to use our tools before earning their doctoral degree. As medicine's largest network, there's an elevated level of responsibility to everything we do. We don't take that responsibility lightly and are committed to working towards a more equitable world inside and beyond our virtual office walls. If you want to learn more about Doximity, make sure you go to your app store, type in DOXIMITY. That's DOXIMITY.